So let's have a quick review of our lesson last time. The author was Pablo. He described himself as a servant of Cristo Yeshu, and he was called to be an apostle and set apart for the gospel of God. The gospel, of course, is about the one who called him, Yeshu Cristo our Lord, described in a couple of ways. Son from David according to the flesh, so that's the physical side, but he's also the Son of God, which is more important in power because of his resurrection, according to the Spirit of holiness. So there's the contrast there, according to the flesh and according to the Spirit. And the addressees are to all those in Rome who are called to belong to Yeshu Cristo, who are loved by God and called to be saints. But of course, as we go through the letter, we will also observe that he has prepared this letter to be read by the Jews, especially those who wanted to understand what this message is all about. Is it really the same with Judaism? Okay, primarily, of course, the believers, to strengthen the believers. Okay, he also had been trying to get to Rome, but has been hindered all those times. He explained that he's not afraid. He's not shying away. He was not trying to avoid them. He was very eager. He said, I am under obligation to all, Judaios or Hellenes, free and barbarians. Basically everybody. So, okay, he's eager to preach the gospel and share spiritual gifts with them and mutually be encouraged. And he's not really ashamed of the gospel. So, okay, let's continue with our study. Again, from verse 16, there are basically two sections here. The short one is the first to only a couple of verses. Pablo presents his thesis, verses 16 and 17, and then Pablo exposes the unrighteous. Okay, just like what you would always hear from your leaders, that when you share the gospel, usually it is you also have to mention the bad side, the bad news, which is people are sinners, and unless they realize that they need God's forgiveness and therefore salvation, they would not accept the gospel. They would only think of it as an alternative way of living. But this is really essential because we need the forgiveness of God. As I've said in the introduction a while ago, the highlights here are 5 of them: the power of God, the righteousness of God, the wrath of God, the glory of the immortal God, and the righteous decree of God. Okay, so especially with the righteousness of God, it is contrasted with the unrighteousness of man. We'll actually discuss more of this actually until chapter 3, about the unrighteousness of man. Okay, but here in chapter 1, it's more of everybody, especially the pagans. And then when we get to chapter 2, now Paul would be focusing on the sinfulness of his fellow Jews. All right, so let's read again. So this is the introduction to the gospel. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, Evangelion. So remember, I told you that I want you to be more familiar with the Greek. But of course, remember, even though some of this would sound familiar to you because we use a lot of words that originate from Greek, it doesn't mean that they mean the same thing. So you really have to look at Greek dictionaries in order for you to understand, to define the words more accurately. All right? But at least just going through this will make you somehow familiar with the Greek words. Okay, so these are transliterations. Okay, let's do that again. I'm not ashamed of the gospel, Evangelion, for it is the power or dynamis of God for salvation, soteria. So the study of salvation is soteriology. Okay, to everyone who believes, pistevo. Now, sometimes they call it pisteo, but this is Kine-Greek. In some pronunciations, the upsilon becomes V or F. Okay, so when it is preceded by alpha, epsilon, or eta. Okay, so everyone who believes. Now, be familiar with this term pisteo because this will often show up throughout the letter. Okay, to the Judaios first and also to the Hellenes. Now you'll find some cross references there on the right side, at least on my screen. Chapter 2 verse 6 and chapter 3 verse 20. We'll get to there. So let's ask the questions first, or the scriptures. So let's focus on ashamed, because we actually talked about verse 16 a little bit in the last lesson. Did some people think that Pablo was afraid to proclaim the gospel in Rome? Some people were questioning his sincerity. It's like, okay, this is Rome, the center of the empire. maybe you can trick people to believing the gospel in other places but not here. Okay, there are a lot of smart people here. But remember, he also went to Athens and to Corinthos, and it's believed that this letter was written in Corinthos. Okay, so, and he encountered a lot of sophists there. Okay, so what can the power of God do? Here it says here, the for salvation, for our salvation. Are there people unsavable for the gospel? Well, Paul said everyone, all right, who believes actually. So there's a qualification. There has to be belief, which is a response. We'll get to that as we go to throughout the letter, because people would think that belief is a gift, all right? So unless you're given the gift to believe, then you won't believe, all right? Is that true? Okay. So Paul qualified them here, whatever ethnicity, whether Jew or Judaeos or Hellenes, is belief a prerequisite? I believe this is what the text is saying. He's encouraging the people to believe the gospel, which is actually the Lord Jesus Christ. Is this a type of work? Okay, we will find in chapter 2, verse 6, this is different. Okay, ergon, you often hear that ergonomic, right? So, he will render to each one according to his works. Okay, so what you have done in your life. So this is general. But the Jews would think that one, if they comply with the law, okay, so this is a particular kind of work, that they are righteous in God's sight. In fact, some of them would think that they're righteous in their own eyes. Okay, for by the works of the law, so this basically fulfilling the requirements of the law. So it's actually the people working to what the law requires. Ergon nomu, so the Greek word for law is nomos. No human being will be justified in this sight. So I have to you a couple of references, because in chapter 2 this is general. Chapter 3 this is specific to the Jews, about because they have this thinking that they're righteous when they fulfill the law, specifically the law of Moses. No human beings will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes the knowledge of sin. Right. So let's go back to the questions. Why is the gospel for the Judaeos first? It's because the Mashiach came from among them. He was a Jew, all right? We know that. Okay, and Paul, being a Jew first, he prioritized his fellow people because they are primarily the people of God. But you'll find out in chapter 9 that God extended what it means to be people of God. So it's not just limited to ethnic Jews, but also to any person who believes, including non-Jews. All right, so God wants to expand it to the whole world. Who are the Hellenes? Are they a race or people who speak the language? I think people who speak the language, because during those times Greek was the lingua franca, so everybody practically could speak Greek at that same time, even though it was the Romans, and Latin was the language especially for business and for the elite. Yet eventually it will spread so much even to the common people, especially for the religious ones. No? Okay, so I hope that covers verse 16. Now I wrote verse 17 on the left. Okay, for in it in the gospel. Okay, it is the gospel. For in the gospel the righteousness of God, dikaiasinia theou. Now I want you to remember this, because this will keep on showing up. The word dikaios, okay, righteous. Okay, it will again. You'll find this all over the letter, so it's a good thing to remember this Greek word. Theou, of course, we know that's God. Okay, dikaios sine theou is revealed. So we know apocalypto, unveiling. Okay, usually the book of Revelation is called Apocalypsis. Okay, so remember when you have the long O or the omega, it's a verb form. Okay, from faith or pistis. Again, this is one of the words that you have to be familiar. A while ago, pistevo, that's the verb form. Now pistis is the noun form, or sometimes also as the adjective. It's the same form. From faith to faith, as it is written, the righteous, dikaios. So you can see that Paul was drawing the idea that the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith. The righteous dikaios, so this is in the human, okay, nominative, shall live by faith. So this is a quotation from Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 4 in the Old Testament. Okay, let's go to the question. When proclaiming the gospel, what should we emphasize? So in this case, it's about the righteousness of God. Because eventually, we are actually going to be compared if we are righteous enough. I mean, the Lord Jesus would be talking about this also in Matthew chapter 5. Unless your righteousness surpassed those righteousness of the Pharisees. Okay. So, being right, basically, righteousness is being right or being blameless. Okay. So that's the righteousness of God. That's the next question. What is the righteousness of God? God is the standard of right. There's no fault in Him. However you understand what is right, you just look at God. He is right. Okay. He's not unjust. He's not crooked. So this is also refers to His morality, that God is a perfectly moral being. There's no sin in Him. There's no fault in Him. Okay. And also He is just. Okay. So actually the word just is also dikaiosine, okay, or sometimes dikaios. It depends on the case. So why not the holiness of God? Well, of course, Paul could have chosen the holiness of God, but he's right now emphasizing, perhaps as some scholars would say, on the legal aspect. Okay, that you are declared righteous. That means you are not guilty. You are acquitted. Okay, so this is more of the forensic side. So rather than the religious, or Paul did not focus on the holiness of God. Well, he could have, okay. But again, the context, he wants to emphasize the righteousness of God, forensic. So this is one of the phrase that many scholars have different interpretations, okay. It could be translated from faith for faith, from faith to faith, which is actually the most common translation in other English versions, but I'm here I based it on ESV. Okay, so it says here, from faith for faith. Okay. So it could also mean by faith for faith. Now, what does this phrase mean? So some people would say that it is from the Old Testament faith, the same principle, it works from faith, to the New Testament faith. Some would say you start with faith and you end with faith. Now, some would say that from faith, that means the origin of faith is in God, and then it is for our faith. So we can have faith in God, okay? So maybe they're all correct. Maybe they're all correct. Is this rule from faith for faith or principle only in the New Testament? No, this is also for people in the Old Testament. They had to have faith in God in order to be considered righteous. Okay, who is the righteous in Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 4? Basically, this is in the Old Testament. Okay, basically, if we look at the context there, it's calling for the Jews, okay, to believe in God, okay, that the prophecy will be fulfilled. Okay, but Paul was appropriating this for the gospel. That, take a look at that. In the earlier part of verse 17, it is the righteousness of God. God is righteous. He's perfect. Okay, but here it is people. The righteous. This is not God. These are people. The righteous shall live by faith. The people will live by faith. So that's why from faith to faith, so from faith that is God, God is righteous, for faith for us people. All right? I think that's one of the ways scholars look at this. So did the Judeans consider themselves righteous? Yes, they did. As long as they were complying with the scriptures in the Old Testament. How? Chapter 3, verse 21, that's on the other side. But now the righteousness of God, dikaiosine theou, has been manifested, phanereo, which is another way, aside from apocalypto, phanereo, manifest, apart from the law. Because the Jews would think that we can know the righteousness of God, or be righteous just like God, through the law. Although the law and the prophets bear witness to it. The righteousness of God through faith in Yesu Cristo for all who believe. So it's not from the law, but it is through faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So that means the from faith for faith refers to faith in Yesu Cristo. It's not just living by faith. It's specific to faith in Yesu Cristo. All right. So that's why some interpreters would say, faith on what? Faith needs an object. It's not just a description of the kind of living you have, that you are living righteously. You have faith in the Lord Yeshua. All right? That's the way you get justified or be declared not guilty. But how should it be according to the gospel? Well, we already answered that, through faith in Yesu Cristo. So uh, you cannot put Yesu Cristo out of the picture because he is the center of the gospel. All right. So I hope that was clear is clear enough for us. Okay, what parallels revelation of the righteousness of God? Because it says there in verse 17, the righteousness of God is revealed. So revelation of the righteousness of God in verse 18. So there's a contrast here. You'll find in verse 18, the wrath of God, orgi theou, is revealed, apocalypto too. So you have Paul is using the same word here, apocalypto, revealed. So righteousness of God is revealed. The wrath of God is also revealed. But now, from heaven, so that's a contrast. In the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith, but in verse 18, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven. That's how beautiful Paul wrote these things. Have people seen the wrath of God from heaven? Oh yeah, throughout history. You see, God would use nature to punish people, to show that when they're not living righteously, that God would punish them. There would be famine, there would be plagues, so on and so forth. Catastrophe, earthquakes, even from heaven, like maybe too much rain, so on and so forth, a storm. Okay. Is this universal for all people? Oh yes, because the heaven can reach everybody. Everybody, of course. Is the wrath of God scary? Oh, of course, yes. A lot of people would die, just like in the case of Noah. Right? The Lord destroyed all the unrighteous and saved only Noah because he was the only one left righteous. Did people understand this revelation of wrath from heaven? I believe so. How can they deny that these events through nature, God's hand was there? It's not just a normal function of the earth. All right? Okay. Of course, God uses the normal functions of the earth to also punish people. Okay. Of course, atheists would say, no, it happens all the time. It's normal, plagues, famines, so on and so forth. But of course, God can send them even out of unexpectedly. Okay, when God is angry and He wanted to punish people, did they overcome God's wrath? Nobody could overcome. Of course, God would leave some survivors, especially believers. Of course, sometimes believers also, when He wants to take them, they also could die. Okay, anyway, that's a wider topic. That's actually, like I said it so oversimplified, right? So there's more to it. It's more nuanced. Okay, okay. How are these people contrasted from God? Okay, so God again is righteous, but the people, it says there, against all ungodliness and all unrighteousness of men. So you have the righteousness of God in verse 17, and you have the unrighteousness of men in verse 18. So there's the contrast. Who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth, right? Why were the people suppressing the truth? They're against God. They're angry, perhaps, against God. It's a wonder that they already know that God was punishing them for their sin, but then instead of humbling themselves, they would still persist in their sin. They would not humble themselves before God. So they're suppressing the truth. They know the truth. That means, how can you suppress the truth when you don't know the truth? They know the truth. All right. Well, this will be further expanded in the next few verses. So truth about what? Again, verse 20, but we're still on verse 18. Now, interestingly, from heaven, I think you're familiar with this Greek word, Uranus. So this, the kingdom of heaven, yeah, Uranus. One planet is named after this, Uranus, heaven. Okay, in Hebrew, this is Shemayim. Okay, we're on the second section, the revelation of the wrath of God. So until verse 32. So we proceed with verse 19. For what can be known? So nostos, gno is the verb form. Gnosis is knowledge. Can be known, gnostos. Okay, about God is plain, phaneros. So it's also related to the word manifest. Okay, plain to them, to all people. All right, so they're not innocent about this because God had shown phaneroo. So Paul is repeating the same word, just different use. A while ago it is an adjective, and now it is a verb form. Has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, actually the word attribute is not in the Greek, but of course it's implied because invisible is an adjective, but it is in the noun form. So you have to use a couple of words for one Greek word. Okay, for this his invisible attributes, his eternal power, dynamis, and divine nature, theosis, theotis. All right. Divine nature also is one word, okay, but you have to use two words in English just to explain what this is. Theotis, the root word is theos, which is God, right? Okay, his invisible attributes have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. All right, let's ask verse 19. Did God reveal everything about himself? Okay, of course, God only revealed what is clear and what is necessary. Okay, God is so big that cannot be exhausted. I mean, about him, but he revealed enough about him that we can say, okay, we know God. We know enough of God. Okay, why? In a plain and clear manner. Okay, this is because he wanted to be understood. All right, he wanted to be understood. Was this direct general manifestation or through prophets? Well, of course, God also used prophets afterwards, but most of the times he would use prophets when he have a specific message. But I think what is being communicated here by Paul is that you obviously know it. You can understand it even without explanation. When you look at creation and see how creation behaves, you will get to the conclusion this cannot be all an accident. This is all planned. This is all designed. All right? Even though atheists would reject that, of course, but we're not dealing with the atheists here right now. All right? Let's look at the word attributes. Okay? So again, this is supplied by translators. What attributes of God did he show the people plainly? I think it's the righteousness of God and the wrath of God. Even though the righteousness of God is revealed from the gospel, from faith. And a while ago in the previous verse, in verse 18, he said the wrath of God is revealed from heaven. Okay, I think it's both. I think it's both. Okay, but here it clearly said his eternal power and divine nature. That means God is beyond the physical. He is metaphysical. So, and he is great. That's why he is described with eternal power. So you can actually see his greatness, his power, and then his nature. All right. Normally, when we describe God, we use the three attributes. Omnipotence, it is eternal power. Omniscience, God knows everything. And omnibenevolence. All right? Now, some would say omnipresence. Okay. Omnipresence is actually controversial. There are theologians who don't believe that the scriptures actually teach omnipresence. Well, God knows everything, but he's not everywhere. Okay, even though he is a spiritual being, he's not localized. Throughout the scriptures, you can say the concept of sacred space. Sacred space. All right. So the three actually are omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence. Okay. So his moral qualities. Okay, yung omnibenevolence. That's clear. Okay, rather than omnipresence. But here he uses only a couple of them. The eternal power, basically omnipotence. And of course, divine nature, that God is great and that he is beyond the physical. All right. Where were they perceived? Okay, clearly perceived in creation ever since the creation of the world. Okay, of course, people weren't there from the creation, but you just look at creation, you know that this was made by a divine being. All right. And only a divine being can sustain it. All right. Only a divine being can think of creating this kind of a world. An intelligent being. All right. Since when, again, creation of the world, why perceive? And it says there clearly, it's because, there, no need for explanation. I think it's clear enough for them to rationalize, not really get so philosophical about it. I mean, even a simple rationalization, that they would be justified to think that God exists and this is the product of God against any possible defeater. Okay, it's more plausible than not that this world was created by a divine being, a great being. Okay, so they are without excuse. Okay, excuse for what? That they can say it's vague. They cannot say that we didn't understand that looking at creation that there could be a God. Okay, they could not say that. All right, you will find here parallelism for the next verse. So we ended with verse 20, now we're going to verse 21 to 32. And this is interesting because there is parallelism. So this is a technique, all right? So I asked Gemini AI, can you give me a definition of parallelism? I can get it from our theological books, but I didn't want really to use a theological book to define this, because this is not unique to the scriptures. Okay, even ancient people would use this kind, and even modern people would use parallelism. Okay, you can obviously see this in the Psalms, in the Proverbs. There's the first line parallels with the second line, or the first and third line parallel in the second and fourth line, whether expanding or contrasting or just saying the same idea. I mean, the idea is parallel. All right. So I asked Gemini AI, parallelism in literature and rhetoric. So rhetoric is the art of persuasion. So that is why people wrote in parallelism to make them understand more and make it more artistic, actually, so they can persuade better. Is a literary device that involves the use of similar grammatical structures, words, or phrases within a sentence or across multiple sentences. It creates a sense of balance, rhythm, and emphasis, making the writing more impactful, memorable, and clear. I love the definition of AI, Gemini AI for parallelism. So I'll show the verses later about the man's awareness, man's attitude, man's violation, then God's concession. Okay, here it is. Okay, when you go to grad school and you think, usually they would say A and then A prime. Okay, but here, since I'm using presentation, you can see the first line here, they're aligned. A verses 21 and 32 are aligned. B verse 21, okay, actually 21b, the second part of the verse. 21 parallels with 28 and 32 also. Okay, C, you have 5 verses there, 23, 25, 26, 27, and 32. Letter D, 24, 26, 28. All right, so A is here, man's awareness. Okay, B is man's attitude. C is man's violation, and D, God's concession. All right, so we'll go through it. Okay, so I hope you can appreciate the artistry of this letter. Okay, look at this for the letter A, for although they knew God, and look at verse 32, though they knew God's righteous decree. So the idea is parallel. Okay, let's look at B. Okay, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. That's in verse 21. Let's go to verse 28. They did not see fit to acknowledge God. So the idea is the same. Now, verse 32 is a little bit different. The people did not only do the righteous decree of God. Okay, so they find it inappropriate or not good enough, whatever. Okay, letter C. So what's letter C? Man's violation. Okay, they exchanged the glory of God. That's in verse 23. They exchanged the truth about God. Their women exchanged natural relations. Verse 27, men likewise gave up their natural relations. And then verse 32, but give approval to those who practice them. So they not only do them, they promote that. And they cheer people up who do the same. Letter D again is God's concession. So what you can see in 24, 26, 28, God gave them up. 26, God gave them up. 28, God gave them up. Okay, that's what you want. I'll let you do it. I'm not going to stop you anymore. I'm not going to warn you anymore. I've had enough of you. I've said enough. I've warned you that you'll be punished. Now you're not going to hear from me anymore. So it's like sometimes you say, God, parents would say, I've been telling you you're doing the wrong things, but you keep on doing them. I'm going to shut up now. Something like that. So God gave them up. All right. We'll go to these verses deeper. Verse 21. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, sophoi, that's plural, sophos is singular, they became fools, morainyo. So this is verb form actually, moron. So it's related to the term. It's a different function. So this is in the verb form, became fools. So this is two words in English. And exchanged the glory of the immortal God. The alpha, thartu, okay, theou, okay, immortal God, okay. It's negative because like immortal, im is negative, and then mortal, okay. For images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Okay, let's ask the scriptures again. They knew God in what way? Reasonably or relationally? So we're in verse 12. Although they knew God, I think reasonably. Maybe before they were believers, they were following, so you can say also relationally. But again, Paul was being general here. Okay, so I think reasonably is the closer interpretation. Do people have the capacity to know God even without influence, no one telling them or teaching from other people? Yes, yes. So even if you're saying that there's this remote people group, they would come to the same conclusion about that this world is more than a physical. There's some metaphysical reality, and there could be God. So that's why they have their own versions of gods and goddesses. And since they could not see what this invisible person is, God, so they would appropriate the divine being with great beasts, usually cows. Okay, so as we read in the previous verse, animals, birds and fish. Okay, they have different kinds of gods. All right, so they have the capacity. So wherever you are, you find people have this sense of metaphysics, okay, beyond the physics. Did not honor God. So we find that in verse 21, second line. Was this negligence or refusal or dishonoring? Now, dishonoring is actually more offensive. The negligence is I just don't want to do it. No, I could have, but God is. I just don't want to talk about God. I'm not interested with Him. So there's so many people that are like that. They're not going against religion, but it's just that it doesn't matter to them. Is this just merely like that, or refusal? You ought to recognize God. No, 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 no. I don't like God, so it's stronger. Dishonoring is actually going against. So it gets stronger from negligence and then refusal or dishonoring. I think people have gone to the dishonoring level, even though there are people who are just in the negligence level. Okay, but still they're not without excuse. It says there, give thanks to Him for what? I mean, for life, for world, for everything, for the gift of talent, for the gift of family, for nature, for the gift of food, everything, for this life. Okay. Because of these was God affected. Actually, God's not affected, but they're doing what is not right, especially they're going against Him. God must do something about this because other people are influenced. So you think you can live without God, so and they're influencing other people to do the same. So they're leading other people astray. All right, so God has to put them to stop, especially that this will lead to worse living. So you could say there are people who live a normal life. They're not godly, but they're good people. They're not harming anybody. They just want to enjoy life. They don't curse. They don't something. A lot of people would use that kind of reasoning, but actually they're still sinful. They're still violating God. They're still not honoring God. They're still not giving thanks to Him. All right. So God is not really affected in the sense that He's hurt. Something in him changed. No, but there's this debate in theology: is God emotional, or does God get affected by this? Of course, His nature doesn't get affected, but He reacts. Okay, He reacts to people. So He said, if you're gonna do this, if you're gonna reject me, okay, if you want me to leave you alone, I'll leave you alone. So that's a reaction. But if you humble yourself before me, okay, I'll forgive you, and then I'll bless you. Okay, something like that. Okay. Which two parts of people's natures were affected for refusing to honor and thank God? You can see there the thinking and the heart. Kardia. Okay, the thinking and the heart. So their thinking became futile, so they become corrupted, not functioning right, because they have removed God, which is logically reasonable. God, the idea of God is reasonable. So when they not using logic anymore, it has affected their thinking. And of course, foolish heart. So this is not just emotional, but this also refers to the desire. That means they're disliking God, they're rejecting God. So Paul pushes the case further. Verse 22, claiming to be wise, sophoi, Sophia, wisdom. Okay, how did that affect them? Okay, verse 22 and 23, it says there, so they affected themselves. They're trying to offend God. They're trying to affect God, but God is not offended. I mean, He's not hurt. But He reacts. He can get angry, yeah, something like that. All right, and now, actually, they're hurting themselves for doing this. They're hurting themselves. Okay, claiming to wise, become fools, and exchange the glory of the immortal God. So they did not leave God alone. So it's not true that we'll just be atheists. No, they are against religion. Okay, they're against the idea that God exists. So that's why they're atheists. When you say they're atheists, they're against theos. You cannot say they're just secularists. No, Well, there are people like that, but normally they're against religion, right? Aphtharto theou. Okay, so let's go to verse 22, 21. Futile, worthless in their thinking. Okay, so we're going back to verse 21. Did God do this to people or people upon themselves? Well, God wanted them to acknowledge Him, to be thankful to Him, so they did this to themselves. They're harming themselves. So that's the answer there. They have become worthless in their thinking, okay, because they have become irrational. Is it true that the more atheistic one becomes, the more intelligent he becomes too? This is the argument I often hear from them. Okay, atheists are more intelligent, they're brighter, they're smarter, they're more scientific. Well, actually, there are a lot of Christians, even in the dawn of the modern times, who are Christian scientists, and even until now, we have a lot of Christian scientists. Okay, they believe in God, and they also believe that science is very useful. That's why they're scientists. Okay, very useful to gain more knowledge about the physical world. Okay, so will you trust a person with a worthless thinking? No, you don't. No, you don't. Okay, so that's why don't be influenced by these people. What can a person with a dark heart do? Okay, their hearts were darkened. Their foolish hearts, not just in their thinking, but in their hearts, they're darkened. So, wow, this is like a moral description. It's the hearts. So, they can do dark things when they have dark hearts. Okay, dangerous things. That's why they exchange the glory of the immortal God. So, that's what they can do. Okay, will a foolish heart make right decisions? No. That's why they're fools. Okay, so don't be foolish. More Greek words here so that we can be more familiar. So glory is doxa. The word glory is all over the New Testament and Old Testament. So you have, of course, Old Testament uses Hebrew, but Greek doxa. So be familiar with this. So the immortal God. So a while ago we said the righteousness of God, and then the wrath of God, and now the immortal God. Okay, the glory of the immortal God. Aphtharto theou for images. Now, icon. Does it sound familiar? Icons. Okay. Iconoclasm are destroying icons. So, the Christian church are arguing about this. Can we have icons? A large number of Christianity said no. A larger number said you can do icons. Now, icons not only are sculptures, not only images like that, but even in the Greek Orthodox, or in the Orthodox Church, in the Eastern Church, icons also include painting. Very artistic. One of the most artistic denominations of the Christian Church are the Eastern churches in the Catholic Church. They use a lot of art. A lot of art. So you have to understand, of course, that this is also an art form. That, of course, they would say that they're not worshiping. Okay, we grant that they don't worship those idols, but they're using art form. Okay, they're using art form. Now, I'm not gonna argue about that. Should you have icons or not? But I'm just mentioning it. It's a whole lot different discussion. So a long discussion. Wait till you get to expose. I grew up in the Catholic tradition. I have seen Orthodox. I appreciate the art. Okay. Anyway, why did they think that it was wise to exchange the doxa of the immortal God for images? Now the problem is exchanging. Exchanging. That's the problem. All right. Those who believe that there could be icons, they would say we're not exchanging, we're mirroring, or again using art for us to understand the history, because the art also tells stories, not just they're there, but it reminds them of their stories. Okay, the images. Okay, that's how they use those images. By the way, Yehudis or Jews do not use images to be reminded of those things. All right. The tabernacle has so much art. The tabernacle and the temple has so much art. All right. Okay. That's another topic. For images, icon resembling mortal. Now, you see, I told you that the alpha is a negative. So we have here aphtharto theou, okay, immortal God, and then mortal man. The alpha is gone. Phtharthu anthropo. Anthropos means man. And then birds and animals and creeping things. All right. So let's go back to the question: are these religious acts for them for the purpose of worship? Now, Paul was referring to those people who exchanged the glory of God, and then they had the icons for religious purposes. For religious purposes, that's what he is targeting. Okay, again, art in the religious sense is not completely. Into idolatry. The churches, that's argumentative. Okay, that's argumentative. So, was that offensive and demeaning to God? But because they exchanged the glory of God. So that's demeaning and offensive to God. All right? Verse 24. Did God take that seriously? Oh, yes. Because the wrath of God, verse 18, is revealed from heaven. God's going to punish them. But at least in this chapter, Paul's not going to tell us the punishment yet. Okay? Just God gave them up. That's the first step of the punishment. Okay, I'll leave you alone. Okay. Did he punish them with pain? Eventually he would, because they're already hurting themselves. They're already hurting themselves by doing this. They have become fools, and their hearts have become hard and darkened. Why did God give them up first? That's what you find in verse 24. God gave them up to the lust of their hearts, to impurity. You know, sometimes that's what we also do as a parent, myself. Okay, you want to do this? See, it's hurt. Hurt. It's not good. It's not good. You're not listening to my warning. You're ignoring me. See what will happen. So that's the idea. Okay. The lust of to their hearts. You don't want the law of the Lord. Okay. Go ahead. Live without the law of the Lord. God gave them up in the lust of their hearts. So it's the hearts. It's an internal issue. To impurity. This is a moral judgment. Okay. To the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. So the pagans do a lot of things to desecrate their body, because in Christian theology, biblical theology, the body is sacred. Okay, and then we have desecrated it. But in Christianity, God has cleansed our bodies. It's the temple of the Holy Spirit. Okay, the body is important. Unlike the teachings in the first century, the Gnostics, well, actually Gnostics have been pre-Christian, but then it crept into Christianity, especially in Egypt. Okay, so that's why you have Gnosticism. Why did God give them up first? Because that's the first step of punishment. Okay, go ahead. See what will happen. Was that fair? I think it is fair. Was that patience? I think it is God's patience. He's not inflicting pain yet on them. Okay, it's not yet. Okay, but of course, we look at human history. God has inflicted pain, just like again the Noah episode. We read verse 24 a while ago, but I'm writing here, the heart is cardia, which is a common word for us in the English, cardiology, about the heart. Let's ask the question, verse 24, where did the lusts of their hearts come? From where? From being selfish. Okay, when you read further in chapter 6, when we live by the flesh is naturally self-oriented. Okay, it just wants to preserve. There is some sense to what science would say. Okay, we're animals. We're animals. But God gave us souls. So we are soulish animals. And because of our soul, rationality, we are able to control our animal instincts. Okay? So instead of being lewd, we think, no, I have to act appropriately because there's rationality. It's the rationality that suppresses our animalistic instincts. Now, that's not enough. That's why we have to be spiritual, which is another level. Another level. Because most of the times, our rationality have become foolish. So we need the Spirit of God. So we don't live by the flesh, fulfilling our body desires. We're not thinking rationally. The rationality is not able to control anymore the animalistic instincts. But when we are living by the Spirit, with the Spirit in us, we are more spiritually oriented. Okay. Now you can argue if that concept that I'm explaining is biblical or not. I think it's biblical, all right? When we get to chapter 6, okay. Anyway, so where it came from, it's actually natural, nature, okay? You find this also in animals. Their fight for survival, for their own kind. For some social animals, for their own community, but for some solo animals, for their own survival, okay? If they made icons for worship, why were they practicing impurity? That's what you find in ancient religions, especially in Corinth, wherein in pagan religion, there's actually temple prostitution. You find more of that issue in First Corinthians, all right? It's like immorality is part of the religious practice. It's unbelievable. Okay, sexual immorality, to be more specific. Did they want this? Yes, they wanted this, because when God is out of the true God is out of the picture, they have exchanged the glory of the immortal God to the animals, so they're becoming like animals. Of course, they don't have shame. Of course, when they want to mate, they'll just mate, right? Even right in front of you, animalistic. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that, because animals don't have the moral law of God. They don't have the capacity to understand the moral of God. They're not under the moral law because they don't understand the moral law, because they are of a lower kind of creatures. So human beings are higher kind of creatures because we are rational animals, as one to say. Animals because we have the physical nature. I don't use it in the negative sense. Animals because we have that kind of a nature. But we are rational. We have souls, all right? We have thinking. So we think how to behave properly. Okay? We don't do those things in public. We do those things in private. But when you have lost the law of the Lord, people do those things in public, right? That's why you have corn. You know what I mean? They wanted it. Is it not foolish to dishonor their bodies? It is foolish to dishonor their bodies, because they do a lot of things. That's why you have a rise. The problem with the Philippines right now, especially in this 500% jump in sexually transmittable diseases. Okay, were they proud of it? Yes, they were proud of it. Verse 25. Okay, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, pseudos. In Greek, pseudos. Okay, and worship. So there are two things that they did: worship and serve. Okay, they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worship, sebatsomai, and latrevo. Okay, this is where we get the word idolatry, latrevo, which is the act of serving the creature rather than the creator, who is blessed. Evlogethos. So F is good, the evangelism, good message. Logos, okay, evlogetos. So blessed, like good words, praises, good words, forever. Amen. Okay, verse 25. Thus, exchanging the truth about God permit them to live impurely and dishonorably. Well, that's what happens when the truth doesn't matter anymore. It's all about lies. They can lie about moral values. They can lie about immorality. They would make it look like moral. Sexual immorality is now a moral thing to do. So that's why impurely and dishonorably. Did other people know this was a lie? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. It's nature for us. I mean, kids know that you cannot do that. Those are adult stuff. Do creatures deserve worship and service? No. Only the Creator deserves worship and service. So there are two kinds: worship, sabetsomai. There's another word for worship, which is to fall prostrate, proskineo. That's not the word that was used here. Sebatsomai is the word that was used here. And latrevo. Okay? So only who the Creator. Verse 26, for this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions, pathos. You know, we always use the term pathos. It's more of the emotional part here, but passions. Okay. For their women exchanged natural relations, physiken kresin. For those that are contrary to nature, physis. Sounds familiar, right? Physics, okay? Whatever, physical. In this English translation, it's nature. And men likewise gave up natural relations, physiken kresin. So the same phrase with women who were consumed with passion. So again, it's about passion. Consumed, like burning in with passion. So it's without control. Okay, they're not using their thinking anymore. They just want to be driven by the lust, by passion. Okay, for one another, animalistic nature. When committing shameless acts with men and receiving themselves the due penalty for their error. All right. So let's verse 26. Did God like to give people up to their dishonorable passions? No, God didn't like it, but people were insisting. So, okay, do it your way, but you'll be sorry for this. Why did he do so? He cannot force people. He cannot force people. If they want to live that kind of lifestyle, he cannot stop them. Okay, he cannot stop them because he had to respect their free will. Again, where did those passions come from? From their nature. Okay, that's why if we are mere animals, if God did not create human beings, if He did not put rationality or soul into us, it would not be wrong for us to behave like animals because we're just like animals. We're merely animals. Okay? But God decided to make us human beings to be human with rational soul. All right? So we are higher than this. And we act not according to our animalistic nature, but we act according to our rationality. Okay? We reason out. Verse 26b and 27, what did women and men do among themselves? So instead of men liking women, women liking men, what they did is women for women, men for men. Even you look at this in Greek, this is sexual in nature. This is sexual in nature. This is not just I like you. Let's have this involves sexual acts. Okay. So again, the word exchange was used. The problem is exchanging. A while ago, they exchanged the truth about God for icons, and then truth for lie. Now it gets worse to their behavior. Okay, they want fellow women, men want fellow men. Okay, so this is clear. Is contrary to nature or physis an immoral act, a violation of moral law? Yes, for us, not for animals. Not for animals. Of course, even animals, they would like their opposite kind. So if animals actually desire for the opposite kind, how much more rational beings, right, like us? Are these sexual acts? Yes, they are. Consumed with passion, can they stop themselves, or did they not want to? They cannot stop themselves, especially when you're into this. It becomes an addiction, and you become shameless about this. Okay, you don't think right anymore. Were they aware of the penalty? Well, the last line of verse 27 says, yes, the due penalty for their error. Did they care about it? No, they're not thinking of it. It's their passion. What they care for is just acting upon their passions. Verse 28. And since they did not see it fit to acknowledge epignosis, so that's not simply gnosis, this is epignosis. Normally, the scholars would say this is about a deeper kind of knowledge. Acknowledge God. God gave them up. So we have again that God gave them up to a debased mind, nous. Okay, in psychology, it's not just psyche, it's nous also in the mind. Okay, to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Now, we can talk about each one of them, but that's too much now. You can do that on your own. Like, look at each of these bad qualities, bad acts, okay? Verse 28, let's ask the scripture, what made them perceive that God should not be acknowledged? Because if they acknowledge God, they have to stop living by their passions. Because they know, if God is in the picture, they have to behave. Was that reasonable enough for God to give them up to a debased mind? Yes. Again, they're insisting it. We don't want you. We are exchanging you. You are just like image of animals, birds, something like that. So they're insulting God. So we can also do this. They're justifying their animalistic behavior. Were they aware that God has given them up? Yes, they were aware. In fact, they're going against God, His moral law. Was it intentional for the people to do ought not what to be done? Yes. Yes, that's why they're getting rid of God. Verse 29, what filled up their hearts and minds? All manner of unrighteousness. So Paul started with unrighteousness and then evil, covetousness, malice, so on and so forth. So these are sins against themselves and sins against others. It covers actions, it covers thinking, it covers attitude, it covers behavior and conduct. Again, if you want to dig deeper there, just do it by yourself na lang. All right, verses 29b to 31. So then what have they become? Okay, they're evil, covetousness, malice, and so on and so forth. Is this a good explanation for the state of the world right now? Yes, obviously this is, I believe what Paul is saying here, when they get rid of God in the picture, these things happen to people. They become evil and bad, unrighteousness. Okay, last verse. though they know God, epignosis, know the righteous decree of God. So we have the power of God, we have the wrath of God, we have the glory of the immortal God, and then now we have the righteous decree of God. Dikaioma to theou. So I told you dikaios, the root word is all over the book of Romans. Okay, let's look at the comment down there. Dikaios is the righteous. Sometimes it's used a noun, means sometimes it's an adjective. Dikaisine, righteousness, also a noun, but more of the state of becoming right or being right. Dikaioma, righteous regulation. So this is also a noun. Okay, so you have to use two English words for one Greek word for us to understand more that this is different from dikaios. Okay, or righteous dikaisine. Okay. Let's read the verse first. Okay. They knew the righteous decree of God that those who practice such things deserve to die. So punishment. In the previous verse, end of verse 27, the due penalty for their error. Now Paul is ending here. Actually, verse 32 is a bridge also for chapter 2. Okay, it's a bridge. Okay, there's a punishment for this. They deserve to die. Thanatos. Okay, when I ask a person about this movies, Thanos, is the theme about the character about death? Because that's the impression that I had. I don't watch movies. Actually. I have never watched. Is that Marvel or something? Yes, the idea is to get rid of people. So the theme of that character is about death. So I think they just shortened it to make it more appealing. Two syllables, but in the Greek it's thanatos, death. This is a common word also in the New Testament, so get familiar with this. Thanatos means death. They deserve to die. They not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. So they get worse. It's not that they're doing this for themselves, they're promoting it. How was the righteous decree of God, moral law, made known to people? Okay? Again, a while ago we said it is through the nature. Okay? And even with the punishment, they know that God punishes evil. They know that. Intuition, I think so. Codified laws, yes, codified laws are basically based on our intuition, that we know what is right. We don't find it spelled out. We spell it out by codifying them into laws. So we say murder is wrong and it has to be punished. Before then, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. We have to codify them. So some people were saying the Ten Commandments, that's a codification. But even prior to the Ten Commandments, people knew that murder is wrong, perjury is wrong, all of the stuff. Worshipping other gods aside from God, they know it's wrong, but it has to be codified because Israel had to become a nation at the time. So God gave them the Decalogue or the Ten Commandments, a codified. It has to be written down, okay? Deserve to die. Is this rule true? Yes. Eventually, no. Death, most of the times we think of this ceasing to exist in the physical sense. But death is much more than that. Okay? Especially when you find that in Genesis, death is separation from God. Okay? Is this rule obvious? I think so. That's why we have laws. Is this rule objectionable? No, it's not objectionable. It's a righteous decree. That eventually there's death. In fact, some of the punishments, for example, in Deuteronomy, if you don't want to worship the one true God and you're part of that community, you have the option actually to leave the community. If not, the people will get rid of you. If you want to worship other gods, stay away from us. Join other communities. Because this place, the only one true God is worship. We want truth. We want righteousness here. Once you depart from the truth and from righteousness, you're kicked out. Just like Adam and Eve were kicked out from the garden. Because the rule in that garden, only one God can be worshipped. Righteousness should be the standard of living. All right? So it's not objectionable. What made them more guilty? By promoting them, by approving others and telling them, go ahead and practice this. Is approval this silent or direct or both? I think this is more than silence. Like, okay, I see you doing bad, but I'm not saying anything. I'm not condemning it. That's what you mean by silence. It's not just that. This is direct, like they're encouraging people to do it. They're promoting people from doing it. So we find it in media, especially this month. Maybe we can call this humility month. We need to be humble before God, not pride. Pride is a sin, okay? Or both. Yeah, it starts from silence and then it goes to the encouragement or direct. All right, that's the last verse of our study for today. So let's review the revelation of the righteousness of God, which is what the gospel presents, verses 16 to 17. And then the revelation of the wrath of God, Paul exposes the unrighteous. Okay, the power of God, the righteousness of God, the wrath of God, the glory of the immortal God, and the righteous decree of God versus the unrighteousness of men. Okay, we'll see you in the next lesson.